He hadn't spoken in 14 months, but that afternoon, as she twirled barefoot on the marble floor with him limp in her arms, he let out a sound his father hadn't heard since the accident, a laugh. The house was quiet in the way only mansions could be, rich with echo, hollow with silence. Thomas Wexler stood by the glass wall of his study, watching the late autumn leaves swirl across the estate's empty drive. Beyond the manicured gardens and hedge sculptures, the city buzzed in the distance, but here in this palatial prison of marble and money, time felt frozen. He adjusted the cuff of his pressed shirt. It was exactly 6:01 p.m. He knew because that's when his son's nurse would be signing off and the evening help, her, would be settling in. He didn't dislike her. He didn't particularly like her either. He didn't feel much of anything these days. The accident had taken that from him. Across the estate, on the second floor of the West Wing, Naomi Matthews adjusted her head wrap and placed a lavender-scented cloth across the boy's neck. He was only 8, maybe 9, but so small in that oversized medical chair. "Hi there, sweetheart," she whispered gently, brushing back a stubborn curl from his forehead. "You want to hear some music today?" His eyes didn't move. They hadn't in months. But Naomi believed in talking to people, not at them, and certainly never around them. She placed her old Bluetooth speaker on the windowsill. Soft jazz floated out, warm, earthy, playful, something from a simpler time. She let it play as she pulled out the evening meds. Then she did something no one in that house ever did. She danced, not wildly, just her hips swaying gently, the curve of her arms matching the rhythm, as if she were inviting the silence itself to come dance with her. If you'd looked from the hallway, it would have seemed like a mother dancing with her child, or a sister coaxing joy from stillness. But in the shadows beyond the open door, someone was watching. Thomas stood frozen. He had come to check on a document in the library, but the faint sound of music had led him here. What he saw turned something over in his chest. Naomi hadn't seen him yet. She was humming now. "You like that one, baby boy," she said softly, turning the chair toward the window. The last light of day haloed around her figure. She didn't look like help. She looked like hope. His son's mouth twitched. Was that a smile? Thomas stepped back, quietly, before she could notice him. He didn't sleep that night. The following evening, Naomi returned as usual, her soft, floral perfume and even softer footsteps carrying into the boy's room. She didn't know Thomas had seen her the day before. She didn't know how long he'd stood there, or that he'd watched the replay of the hallway camera 3 times in his private study later that night. She only knew that when she stepped into the boy's room that evening, something felt lighter. "Hey, little man," she whispered, touching his wrist lightly. "You ready to let me show you that 2-step again?" Outside the door, Thomas hesitated. He should walk away. He was the employer. She was the maid. His son was broken, but his feet didn't move. Inside, Naomi was swaying again. Not full-out dancing like before, but rhythmic, almost meditative. She placed one hand on the boy's chair and lifted the other into the air as if imagining him rising to meet her. A soft blues tune swirled through the room. She hummed, a low, honey-smooth sound, and began to talk. "You know what I learned, baby boy. The body remembers joy. Even if the mind forgets, even if the words get stuck somewhere deep, the body remembers dancing." Thomas's eyes stung. She continued, spinning lightly, catching the boy's hand in her own. "Your daddy probably danced once," she said with a playful laugh. "Bet he had 2 left feet, though." She didn't see Thomas clench his jaw behind the door, but his son did. The boy's right hand twitched, not a full movement, barely a flicker. But Naomi stopped. She saw it, and her breath caught in her throat. "Do that again," she whispered. Silence. Then, just barely, his index finger moved. Naomi dropped to her knees. "Oh my God, baby." She placed her hand over his and held it gently. Thomas stumbled back. His heart pounded. His face was flushed. His legs trembled. What he had just witnessed, he couldn't explain. His son had responded, not to therapy, not to the expensive specialists, to her, to the maid, to the music, to love. He didn't sleep again that night, not from pain, but from something scarier. Hope. Thomas didn't enter his son's room for the next 3 days. He told himself he was busy, that the markets were volatile, that he needed to manage the estate's legal documents. But really, he was afraid. Afraid of that small twitch in his son's hand. Afraid of what it meant that he hadn't been the one to draw it out. Afraid of the truth Naomi had unearthed, that maybe, just maybe, love could do what all his money couldn't. Naomi noticed the shift immediately. The house was colder again. Not physically. The temperature held steady at 72 degrees. But emotionally, something had iced over. The nurse, Linda, had returned to the boy's side during the day. Naomi's evening hours felt clipped, watched. And then, on the 4th evening, the music speaker was gone. She found it missing from its usual spot on the window ledge. A pale blue envelope rested in its place. Inside, a typed note. Please refrain from non-therapeutic activities in the boys' recovery suite. This includes music, dancing, and unnecessary physical interaction. Thank you. Management. She stood still, the note trembling in her hand. She knew management was him. Downstairs, Thomas poured himself a 3rd drink of scotch, neat, in the dim silence of his study. He hadn't intended to be cruel. He just didn't know what to do with what he'd felt. She was the maid. This was his son. And yet, he couldn't shake the image of her spinning, full of warmth, holding a child who hadn't smiled in over a year. What right did she have to do what he couldn't? Naomi didn't confront him that night, but she didn't dance either. She sat beside the boy, humming under her breath, her fingers still aching to move. The boy's eyes twitched in confusion, or pain. It was hard to tell. I'm sorry, baby, she whispered, gently squeezing his hand. I didn't mean to make anything worse. His eyes blinked once, slow, deliberate. A tear slid down his cheek. Can healing be stopped by fear? Or is love always stronger, no matter the rules? Drop your thoughts below. The storm came in the early hours. Heavy rains, howling winds, and a county-wide power outage left the Wexler estate running solely on backup generators. The system powered only vital rooms, the security gate, master bedroom, and the medical suite. It also disabled the private elevators, which meant Naomi was stuck upstairs. Thomas had been informed via intercom that the backup unit had malfunctioned and the staff quarters were temporarily inaccessible. He'd cursed under his breath, until the house manager added, "She's still up there, the maid, Naomi, with your son." A part of him wanted to storm up and send her home, storm or no storm, but something in his chest, pride, guilt, shame, stopped him. Instead, he poured himself another coffee and sat in the quiet living room, waiting. Upstairs, Naomi paced. The boy had cried. Not loudly, but quietly. 2 wet lines streaking down his temples as the power blinked out, and machines rebooted. She had held him then, against protocol, whispering against his temple, "Shh, baby, I got you." No music, no light, just her heartbeat and his labored breath. Around 9:17 p.m., Thomas finally came up, flashlight in hand. He found them in the dim candlelight sitting on the floor beside the bed. Naomi looked up, startled. "I thought the stairs were blocked." "They're not," he replied curtly. "They're just long." He stood there for a beat too long. Then she spoke, low and steady. "If you want me to leave, I'll need help down. And a flashlight." She was challenging him, but gently, with dignity. He sighed, ran a hand through his damp hair. "No, don't leave. He needs you." That admission cost him more than she could know. She nodded. "I'll stay the night then. But you'll need to help me with his meds. I can't carry him alone. Not with the lifts down." He hesitated. I've never touched him since the accident." Her eyes searched his. "Then maybe now's a good time to start." Together, they lifted the boy, slowly, carefully, and repositioned him on the bed. It was awkward, tense, but in that moment something shifted. The three of them for the first time existed not as roles, boss, maid, patient, but as people. Naomi lit another candle. Thomas sat beside the bed, and for the first time in 14 months he whispered, "Hey, buddy." His son blinked once, then again. Thomas's voice cracked. "You still in there?" Naomi didn't speak. She just smiled, letting the silence speak louder than any words could. The rain softened sometime after midnight. Thomas and Naomi sat quietly by the boy's bed, the candlelight casting long, flickering shadows along the wall. The backup generator still hummed faintly in the background. She broke the silence first. "You ever wonder if you did something wrong, and the universe is punishing you for it?" He turned toward her slowly, not answering. She didn't wait for permission. "My son was 3 months old when I left him," she said quietly. "Had to. No job, no milk, no heat. Left him with my sister while I worked the night shift at the hospital. I was just a cleaner then, back in Atlanta. Got off late one night, came home and—" She paused, swallowed. "He was gone. Not dead. Just gone. My sister's ex took him, crossed state lines. Police never found him. It's been 11 years. Thomas's face tightened. She smiled, but it was brittle. "I came here thinking it'd be just another paycheck, but your boy, he reminds me of mine. The way his forehead crinkles when he dreams. The way he holds his breath sometimes, like he's waiting to be heard." Thomas stared at her. For a long time he said nothing. Then he stood. Naomi assumed he was leaving, emotionally withdrawing again. But instead, he walked to the corner of the room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a photo frame. He handed it to her. It was a picture of his wife and their son. "I wasn't there that day," he said, voice hollow. "The day of the crash. I was closing a deal in Chicago. I ignored her call. Twice." She left a voicemail. "Just wanted to tell you we're headed to the zoo. He's so excited, baby." He looked down. "She died instantly. He survived." Naomi's hand covered her mouth. Thomas turned away, eyes glassy. "Sometimes I think God kept him alive just to punish me. A daily reminder of what I wasn't, of who I failed." The air between them felt sacred now. Heavy. Real. She stood slowly and stepped closer. "You didn't fail him," she whispered. "You're still here." He shook his head. "But I don't know how to be enough." "You don't have to be enough," she said. "You just have to be real. Even broken things can hold love." And for the first time in 14 months, Thomas cried. Not a single tear, not a manly sniff, but a deep, gut-wrenching release that broke the silence of the house. She didn't touch him. She just stayed close. And his son's eyes, half closed and unreadable for so long, flickered with something soft, something alive. The storm passed by dawn. Naomi woke, curled up in the armchair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders that she didn't remember pulling over herself. Thomas was gone from the room, but a small plate of toast and scrambled eggs waited for her on the nightstand. She blinked, smiled, and for the first time in weeks, so did the boy. It was faint, but real. She leaned close. "You see that? You got your daddy to cook. That's a miracle." Downstairs, Thomas wasn't cooking, not really. The housekeeper had returned and insisted he take the morning off, but he had plated the food, himself, and he'd left it. For her. Later that afternoon, Naomi asked permission to take the boy outside. It was warm, sunny. The garden was full of scent and birdsong. To her surprise, Thomas didn't just allow it. He joined them. They wheeled the boy onto the patio under the giant umbrella near the koi pond. Thomas sat on the edge of a stone bench, awkward but present. Naomi laid a soft blanket out for the boy's legs and started to hum. He chuckled. Not Thomas, the boy. It wasn't loud, more like a breath that caught and hiccuped, but it was laughter. Thomas froze. His hands started to tremble. Naomi covered her mouth, then looked up at the father. "Talk to him," she said gently, "just like that day." Thomas swallowed. I don't know what to say. Doesn't matter. Just say anything. So Thomas leaned in, voice unsteady. Hey, buddy. Remember that zoo trip we never got to finish? You were so excited about the monkeys, screaming louder than they were. I bet they're still mad you took their spotlight. A breath. Then, again, laughter. A full, light, wheezy chuckle. Naomi's hands flew to her heart. Thomas covered his eyes. And then, he laughed too. A real one. Full of disbelief. And something else. Relief. The wall was breaking. That afternoon they stayed in the garden until the light faded. Naomi told stories from her old neighborhood, silly, wild ones. Thomas shared about the time he tried to build a treehouse and broke his arm falling out of a bush. The boy didn't move, but his eyes did, following them, trusting, breathing, healing. For a few hours, the house didn't feel like a grave. It felt like home. The moment started small, like they always do. It was a Tuesday. The nurse had the day off. Naomi was tending to the boy in the afternoon, brushing his hair, humming softly, when Thomas came into the room holding a phone. His face was pale. I need to talk to you, he said. Naomi looked up, sensing something sharp in his voice. He didn't sit. He just stood there, phone still in his hand. I had a call this morning, he began, from someone at the agency. Her brow furrowed. Okay. They told me. His voice cracked. They told me you falsified your file. Naomi straightened. Excuse me? You said you had no dependents, no family obligations, that you were fully available. Her throat tightened. I didn't lie, she said low. Thomas's eyes flickered. You didn't tell the truth either. There was a long silence. Then she said it. I didn't tell them about my son because I didn't think it mattered. I'm not asking for sympathy. I needed the job. He exhaled harshly. Do you know what kind of liability that puts on me? If they find out, if who finds out, she snapped. I've done nothing but love that boy. You're not supposed to love him, he shouted suddenly. The words echoed in the room like a slap. Naomi froze. So did the boy. Thomas's voice dropped. You're the maid, Naomi, not his mother, not his therapist, not... He stopped. Her voice came out cold. Not what, Thomas? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the fear. He had started to care for her, more than he meant to, and it scared him. He backed away from it the only way he knew how, by burning everything. I think it's best we bring in someone else, he said stiffly. A professional. Naomi blinked hard, her vision blurring. You want me gone? He didn't answer, but the silence said everything. She turned toward the boy, kissed his forehead and whispered, You keep smiling, baby boy, no matter who tries to take your light. Then she walked out. Thomas stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. His son looked at him, and for the first time, the boy's lip quivered. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Thomas sat down beside him, hands shaking. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so damn sorry. But it was too late. Naomi was gone, and the house was quiet again, not peaceful, empty. Naomi didn't cry in the Uber. She didn't cry when she reached her tiny apartment on the south side of town. She didn't cry when she took off her uniform and folded it neatly, laying it on her bed like it still belonged to a part of her. But at 2:17 a.m., when she found the small hand-drawn picture the boy had made, one she'd never even seen him draw, tucked into her side bag, she broke. Crayons, a stick figure of her, a bigger one of him. They were holding hands, and above them, scribbled in uneven letters, Naomi Smile Buns, my favorite. She collapsed to the floor. Meanwhile, at the estate, the silence was unbearable. Thomas sat beside his son's bed for hours. The boy hadn't laughed, hadn't twitched, hadn't blinked in recognition. The light had gone out again, and this time Thomas knew exactly who had extinguished it. He stared at the door she used to walk through, and every time it didn't open, the guilt dug deeper. That night, he did something he hadn't done since the funeral. He prayed, not for himself, for his son, and for Naomi. The next morning, he made calls, not to the agency, to the police department in Atlanta. He didn't ask why, he just told them a story, about a woman, about a son stolen, about a family broken. He hired a private investigator, quietly, discreetly. And then he drove. Not in the Bentley, in his late wife's old Camry. He pulled up to Naomi's building just before noon. His hands shook on the steering wheel. He rehearsed the words 1,000 times, but nothing prepared him for the moment she opened the door. She looked tired, worn, beautiful. He held up the picture she'd drawn. "I found this in his bed," he lied. "I think it was meant for you." She took it silently. "I'm sorry," he said, voice raw. "I was afraid of how much I started to care, of what it meant." Naomi didn't speak. "I thought pushing you away would make things easier," he continued, "but all it did was break us again." Still, she said nothing. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Don't open it yet," he said, "but I hired someone to help find your son. I don't know if it'll work, but I had to try." Her eyes finally met his. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" He smiled sadly. "Because you found mine again, when I had already given up." She held the envelope tightly. "You still want me to come back?" "I want more than that," he said, voice cracking. "I want you to belong." She stepped back, looked down, then reached up and touched his hand. "I'm not ready to trust you yet," she said quietly. "But I want to." He nodded. "I'll wait." 2 weeks passed before Naomi returned to the estate. The boy had declined slightly after she left, not physically but emotionally. His eyes dulled, his breathing slowed. He slept too much. But when she walked through the door that Friday afternoon, floral wrap on, soft perfume in the air, his eyes lit up. And Thomas, he didn't greet her as help. He greeted her at the door, like someone returning home. "Hey," he said softly. She smiled. "Hey yourself." They didn't hug, not yet, but the space between them no longer hurt. It hummed. That evening the music returned, not loud, just the soft blues she used to play, the room filled with the same warmth it had once known. Naomi stood in the same spot she had that very first day. Then she looked at the boy. "Can I?" she asked. Thomas nodded. She danced, slowly, arms lifting, feet light, her hips swaying like a secret. Then something unimaginable happened. The boy's hand moved, deliberate, toward her. Thomas choked on a sob. Naomi stepped closer, took his hand and placed it over her heart. "You feel that?" she whispered. "That's for you." Tears streamed silently down the boy's face, and for the first time since the accident, he let out a sound. One word. Home. Thomas fell to his knees. She looked at him, and now she did reach out, not just for the boy, but for the man. She helped him up. They stood side by side, a broken father, a lost mother, a nearly silenced child, becoming a family. Months passed, and slowly, healing rooted itself into the bones of the house. Naomi no longer clocked in. She lived there. The boy's condition began to improve. Small movements, vocal sounds, flickers of life returned. And one early spring morning, as Thomas was preparing tea in the kitchen, Naomi stepped in, holding an envelope. "I opened it," she said. His face turned pale. She handed it to him. Inside was a letter from a small county in South Carolina. They'd located a boy, 11 years old, name matched, DNA pending. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. "If it's him," she began. "If it's him," Thomas said, "we bring him home, together." They stood in silence. Then she whispered, "You still think broken things can't hold love?" Thomas stepped forward. "No," he said. "I think broken things are where love lives." They kissed, not desperate, not dramatic, just real, soft, true. And outside the window, in the same garden where laughter had once returned, a little boy smiled. He hadn't spoken in 14 months, but now every breath, every blink, every heartbeat whispered one thing louder than ever before: I'm not alone anymore. Can love really heal what medicine can't? What would you have done in Thomas's place? Let us know in the comments.